drafted into the Army? And
Yes.
Go ahead and tell me what happened.
By accident. I went, my cousin and I, who was my age, went up to Detroit to enlist in the Air Force. We had to take a written exam and a physical exam. Well, he and I both ready to go home, and they said, you failed the physical exam. Go home for 6 weeks, drink a lot of water, and eat a lot of bananas, and come back. Well, I was brokenhearted, but that's the way it is. I was skinny, I guess. And so when I got home, I was on the farm. When I got home, my brother was out in the backyard, and he had a white package, and he was grinning from ear to ear, and he says, "Greetings from FDR." I thought, went into the Mediterranean and Algeria, and then across the Mediterranean to Marseille. And then from Marseille, when we got in the port of Marseille, the ships were on their side. So we had to walk across these. Oh, unbelievable. But, yeah. This one concentration camp we went in was Dachau, and as you entered the entryway, the gate, there was a deer blind up there, and the guard was up in the deer blind. So you walked in, and the naked female corpses were corded up like cordwood over there, and the males were corded up over here. And the pigeonholes that the females were in was on this end of the park or compound, and the males were over here. And when I went in the gate and I spoke English, and there was a lady in there. She was in her little pigeonhole on her stomach, and she heard me and talking English, and she could speak English, so she called me over. And she had a burlap bag for a dress. It was pitiful, and cold, damp, and when I turned right, there was a doctor that heard me talking to the fellow buddies, and he called me over. He was a graduate of Johns Hopkins University, a medical doctor. He was in one of those pigeonholes. And he and I got into a conversation, and he told me about where he lived in Zurich, Switzerland. He described where it was, and he described his home, and described his automobile, which was a 1940 DeSoto charcoal burner. And so a few years later, Alice and I went back to Europe. I wanted to take her through my battlefields. And so we went to Zurich, and we found his home. That's how his directions were so explicit, and we found his home. And then the old DeSoto was sitting in the garage. That lady that called me over, we had K bars, energy bars in combat. And some of the GIs broke K bars and started feeding these people. And the lady yelled, "Don't do that, don't do that, they'll die. You'll kill them." That's what she said, "You'll kill them." That was, they called a halt to that. And I had some rank, so I got a little more privilege.
So why did she say they would die?
The K-bars, they had been starving. And the K-bars were potent.
Shock your system.
Oh,
Pancreas overshoot. Wow.
yeah.
That's crazy.
And in France, we were assaulting a limestone villa. And we were going up a slope. And my first sergeant was behind me on my right. And one of my buddies was to my left. And two buddies were to my left. And this one buddy, Eli Sarkissian, It was close to me, my ankle. He had the most beautiful black hair, wavy, beautiful. He was from Detroit. When he got hit, that hair was totally white, white as snow. And he was screaming and begging, and my orders were coming from the guy that was in the doorway of the villa to get up there. And I had to leave him, and that's been gnawing at me all my life. I couldn't help him. But the first sergeant by me lost his leg below his knee. Yeah, that was... I had a lot of incidents like that. You get hardened to it. And a lot of amusing incidents happened. When we first jumped off, before we crossed Tain True Valley, I was with my company commander, and he had a field telephone you cranked. Yeah. And it was up to me to get that phone working for him and going. And I covered all my shiny metal with mud, but he was a spit and polished officer. And everything was spitting, he was pure, he was shiny, and that drew rifle fire. And so anyway, we crossed Tain True Valley, and we got on the other side of Tain True Valley, and I came upon a body. I didn't know it at the time, dead American soldier. And it was a Sergeant Reynolds from LaSalle Township. But I didn't know it at the time. But we passed him and got into the edge of the forest. I can't think of the name of the forest. My mind is shot. But anyway, I did a dumb thing. We were given in our kits, Army kits, little mirrors that were just stainless steel, about this big. So I wanted to shave. It was quiet. So I put the mirror in the tree. I bent down, getting ready to shave. Bing! Ah.
Wow.
That mirror went, I don't know where it went.
Wow. Where did you go after that? I would have too.
Yeah. I was with the battalion chaplain, and it was the lieutenant commander, and we were on a hillside, and looking across the valley, we saw Nazi soldiers going up the side of the mountain, and our troops were over here. So the commander and the chaplain and I figured we had to fire, keep those soldiers, protect the soldiers. And I wouldn't say that I was a coward, but I was hoping I wasn't going to kill anybody.
Sure. And you fired?
Oh, sure.
Did they run at you? What happened?
No, they were going up away from us.
But they didn't turn them around.
And then I didn't see anybody fall, and they had heavy, long overcoats on.
No.
We kept getting reports as to the progress. And my great-grandson has a map, what I have been looking for. He's got a map of France where all my battle lines, where 411th went in. I got to Saint-Dié, France, which was where the Poupards are from. And while we were approaching Saint-Dié, the town was on fire. It was burning down. But the roadway to get to Saint-Dié was around a side of a cliff, and you had to come back in doing a U-turn and come in. And we had troop carriers going by, were stake trucks really, and they had soldiers, American soldiers. And it was just at dusk, and one of the trucks went over the edge. And I was close enough to hear the screaming. That lasted a long time in my mind at night, particularly the screaming when those boys went down. Yeah. So anyway, my wife she was objecting to my retiring at 61 and a half. And she never opposed me in all our marriage, except that day, because we still had Greg and Lynn. Who else was? Oh, Marie.
Becky,
Huh?
still at home.
Peggy. We had them to get them educated. Well, anyway, I said to her, I regretted it when I was so abrupt, but I said to her, I said, "You're my wife. You're supposed to support me." And boom, she clammed up and then on her deathbed, I was in the kitchen. She called me into the den, and she said, that was in Florida, and she said to me, "Eugene, I want you to know how happy I am to be down here." And it's in Florida. And she said to me, "And another thing, I wouldn't change a thing in my life." Boy, I was light as a feather. It was wonderful.